Thanks everybody who's coming on today. Hopefully, once again, your day is going well. You can check out my wife, the Honorable Maya. She's a healer, herbalist, chemist, and biologist by degree. You can check her out on TikTok, YouTube, her website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish, not A and D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. And thank you for your likes and all that great stuff. It helps us to be able, it likes, your shares, getting gifts, your comments, etc. They help us very much. And she's actually on Bloom and Flourish. Thank you so much. And it helps us, especially when people are trying to make it harder to find us. Those things actually help us to make sure we get out the word and can continue to help the community and make sure the diaspora across the universe, let alone the world in universal law, kingdom law, the media, the air waves, and all that stuff. We continue to be able to give the Most High praise and honor. And so we're thankful for you guys helping us with that. Having a little bit of issue with signal. Hold on. But once again, we're thankful and grateful for you all. And thanks for taking your time out. We'll be a little shorter than we usually go because we're getting ready for our Shabbat Shalom service. That'll be on the podcast where my wife and the Honorable Maya and Sister Rose will be on. And so we're excited about that. Everybody seemed to be very excited about class last night. My wife did a work, as always, when it comes to teaching and showing us how to be able to do things. And she was talking about herbalism. So we're definitely excited about those things that she was able to show and to produce and to get us to recognize and see what was going on in her introduction to that 2-month course. So if you guys are interested, if you couldn't make it for whatever reason last night, please make it. It was definitely very, very good. A lot of people saw that she was even able to show that we actually know a lot more about herbalism than we might actually think. So that was exciting to see. And thank you, everybody who's a support to us in our endeavors regarding that. So, yeah, I'm finishing up getting the last couple of things up. We got now it looks like we've got Facebook up and going, and we've got everything but the podcast. So thank you guys for your patience. Today, we're going to get ready to go into back into the FAQ series, the frequently asked questions. And today we're going to see if there's external evidence. Is there external evidence? Is there proof? Well, we've talked about, does God exist? So we're revisiting this a little bit in our FAQ, but this is more so, hey, what outside of the Bible can I use? And there's tons of stuff that we won't even be able to get into today, just hitting the tip of the iceberg. But there's, it's a legit question. Like people say, everything in there is, is just stuff that, you say happened or somebody wrote happened. That's what they like to say, right? Somebody wrote it, but it doesn't mean there's actual proof. So how is it that we find this, or where do we go for this, or where's the external evidence? And so we're going to give you a little bit, some names that we've actually mentioned on some of the lives before. Those of you who've been with us for a while, we'll do a little bit of that today. And we'll use some of this book right here. Once again, we'll show this book that we're kind of using as our guide. It's not necessarily, we don't necessarily share all the beliefs out of this book, but it's something that's great to use as far as a guide apologetically. Apologetics is basically the art of defending that which you believe. And so the book is called I'm Glad You Asked. All right. I'm Glad You Asked by Dr. Kinboa and Larry Moody. I'm Glad You Asked by Dr. Kinboa and Larry Moody. I'm Glad You Asked by Dr. Kinboa and Larry Moody. And it's something that has been a blessing to us as far as making sure that we have a guide. So we're thankful and grateful to everybody being on, to the moderators, to the ministerial staff, to everybody, la-di-da, and everybody that helps this thing to be able to move in so many different directions. We appreciate you. And we're going to be coming from page, focusing kind of starting at page 95 on this book. And we'll expand from there. Since we only have a little bit of time, since we got to get ready for our in relatively speaking, a little bit of time, right? But since we don't have as much time as we normally would have due to Shabbat Shalom service, we're going to kind of jump right in. So let me just say hello to everybody. Hello, Shabbat Shalom, Sister Rhonda. Shabbat Shalom to everybody. To Jay, once again to my wife, the Honorable Maya, who's on, to Bree, to Tamika, to Ransom, to Christina, to Dawn, to True Origin, or I'm sorry, to Minister Select Joseph, to Big Brother Thomas, to Sister Deborah. I'm not on the island. I'm just outside. Amen. Thanks to my wife with a reminder. The disrespect for everybody on here. We ask that you treat everybody with humanity, even if you have questions, even if you don't like what we're saying. Feel free to ask any questions. Put whatever comments, as long as you can do so in a respectful manner. We try to make sure it's respectful to everybody. Mr. MCMXCI, is that Roman numerals? I guess it's Roman numerals. Or I'm not sure. This is Irma Vega. Mel Banks, thanks for being part of the community. Yeah, Lottie Dottie, everybody. Hello to everybody. Right, to Katie. And if I missed your name for some reason or whatever, please charge it to my head and not to my heart. We appreciate your presence. We're thankful and grateful to have you guys on. So today we're going to talk about external evidence. External evidence, right? Is there some kind of proof outside of the Bible? Which there's tons. We talked a little bit even about when the first one that we did in this series, we talked about does God exist and who is God versus Elohim and all these different things or whatever. And if you have questions that I don't get to right up front, since we have a specific topic that we have, I might not get right to your questions right away, but we'll make sure that we do there. Am I Jewish? No, because a Jewish person and a Avda or Hebrew person or an Israelite are not one and the same, right? And when we talk about is there outside evidence, we can actually just immediately show outside evidence for that. Pretty simple. You said don't be ignorant. Okay, well, even a Jewish person would tell you that they believe that where I come from as far as my tribe, right? Because I actually know who I am, where I come from, and where my people come from. And we being Avda, even being Shwe, you would say Ghanaian. But they would, and even some of the people connected to me that are in Nigeria, they would call us Israel, but they would do something interesting. They would say that we are the Beta Israel because they're into saying that they are Alpha, even though that's not even Israelite alphabet. That's Greco-Roman alphabet. But if we were to be sound, they would try to say that they are Beta, which means that they are privy to things legally. That, and as far as the way they do things, that they are legally, right? Well, Beta, like Bet, means house, but Bet means the son who comes out the right house, or the son that comes out the right family. Beta means house, but Beta also is secondary to Alpha, right? So if Beta is secondary to Alpha, what they're saying is they are Alpha Israel and we are Beta Israel. So they still must admit that we are Israel, even though they would say, well, you're lesser than. The problem is, though, is that the very things, the very genes, the very DNA that they say makes them Israel, they actually have to admit that we have more of what it is that says that they are, even though they would say we're Beta. And they still don't give us, if they were to say that we're Israel and all Israelites supposed to have a cut of the pie, they still don't give us a cut of the pie. So those are some things right there that easily begin to show that there's something to it. Also, literally no. Well, also, this is interesting that people simply won't, you said the alphabet is in Greek. The alphabet is in Greek. The alphabet is in Greek, even though modern Hebrew tries to use Greek things. That's why they try to make 27 characters now to be able to copy what it is, because those aren't actual people. The Khazarian or the Ashkenazi, including in the Tanakh or the Torah, literally says that they come from Yavat or Japheth, but we're speaking on something completely different. The evidence is there. Matter of fact, the evidence is so much there that one of the things we don't talk about is who are some of the people who may, well, you and I have one breath before judgment. Okay, that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that I'm better than anybody, but what we would talk about, interestingly enough, and hello Don and hello Brother Clem. The interesting thing enough, as you're busy trying to interrupt or say that I'm wrong about everything, is that Jewish history doesn't agree with what you're saying. Right? We believe in Yashua HaMashiach or Hamashiach or Mashiach or the Messiah. And we have no disbelief in that, but Jewish history doesn't even agree with what you're saying. As far as I'm wrong, for the person that was saying I was wrong, there's a couple of you guys already popping up, and welcome to you. We just ask that you actually listen long enough to know what we're talking about, especially since it seems like you're not somebody who's actually familiar with what we do, because we do this every day. Been doing it for years. Been doing on multiple platforms, and we have these recorded. You can actually go back and do some research on what we're talking about, because we give things and outline things and then say, hey, look it up for yourself on the library, whatever you feel like doing. Or even talking to Jewish people who are some of the people who have schooled me, interestingly enough, because I don't believe that just because somebody's Jewish, they are automatically evil. That being said, Jewish people, Jewish history would not even agree with you that we have nothing to do with it, because here's external evidence. All right. External evidence shows, if I can give another exhibit, I've given a few, but let's call this, I don't know, let's just make this exhibit A just to be easy, right? And thanks for being part of the community, Young Shada. So if what I'm saying is true, there should be some evidence out there that says, well, let me just go back to what I've already said. Is there evidence out there that shows that somebody would say I'm Israel, even if they think that Israel is somebody else, they would still say that my people are Israelite? Well, we already did that. There's evidence out there because they say you're beta Israel because of your DNA. They had to admit it to the world. So even though they still want to claim that they're more Israel than I, they still have to admit that my people, my tribe, my family members, how you doing, Sister Sharon? I'm sorry I missed you. They have to admit that I am Israel. They have admitted that I am Israel. It's documented. Now, if we were to go further than that, the Jewish people wouldn't agree with you. Well, I won't say all Jewish people, but the Jewish people that it seems like you're caping up for wouldn't agree with you, because they have written historical documentation of when they were slave owners. Yes, when they were actual slave owners, when they were into chattel slavery and were making chips and benefited probably from slavery just as much, if not more so, than any other people as far as percentage wise within their community. And those Jewish people in their documentation said that they enslaved Israelites. Interesting. So way before they started telling you they were Israelites and started saying, look at our plight and what happened in Germany. And our plight is how as people, how they don't like us in Europe. They were enslaving us. They have it documented, and they called us Israelites. Not something that I have to make up, not something that I have to say. Look, like they have this documented. They have it documented. The very people that you would say would disagree with me and tell you that I am in fact not an Israelite are the very people that, if you check their documentation, they wrote down who I am. You said, what's the point of claiming Israel is an African being good enough? An Israelite is an African. Right. By the way, I'm Shwi, right? So I'm Shwi, somewhere in Ghana, right? I don't connect with Ghanaian before I connect with Shwi, right? But doesn't mean that the Ghanaian is not good enough for me. And just because I'm a Ghanaian doesn't mean that being, having some Nigerian folk connected to me isn't good enough. I'm also mixed with Kemetic and Cushitic blood. It doesn't mean that that's not something that's good enough for me. And it doesn't mean, therefore, that Alkebulan, Africa, Negro, Moor, whatever you want to claim, isn't good enough for me either. Being part of diaspora all over the world is good enough for me. So just because I know my tribe doesn't mean that I can't connect with my people. That's a falsehood, right? That's not proof of anything, right? For me to mention my name is Kofi, doesn't mean that being a man is not good enough for me. Of course not. That's not a great argument. Let's do things and get away from the Willie Lynch syndrome that it appears you're trying to put on me, where we're separating each other. It doesn't make sense. You said the Israelites that left Kemet of a multitude of all nations. Once again, yeah. Once again, yes. Right, the land of Goshen, these things that we're talking about, Middle Eastern and all that, right? Like you got to comprehend all those people are considered to be African. They still technically are. Speaking of Israel, go to the physical Israel. Here's some external evidence. Go to the physical Israel right now, and there's a sign that you will see that will tell you that you are still technically in Africa, because this whole idea of Asia, believe it or not, especially Europe, because you said you're Asian. Before that, there was no Euro part of it. It was just Asia, and before Asia, Africa was not considered to be what you think it is now on the map. Not just as far as even the physical look of what people have done to maps. I'm talking about Africa was not considered to be just one place. Comprehend, wherever your foot treads, it shall be yours. This concept of because you're born somewhere, that means that you are that. That's a very new concept. That's a 14th Amendment concept. If you know history, when was the 14th Amendment written? Was it written back in the times of Kemet being a world power? Was it written back in the time of Rome being a world power? Was it written back in the time of Flavius Josephus, who we'll get in today? Of course not. So there is no such thing, right? There is no such thing as a Middle Eastern, right? A Middle East used to be when England was becoming the world power, Great Britain, and they said anything on one side of us is east. They said we're west, we're the west, we're the power of the west. Anything on this side is east, right? They said if it's too far, it's far east. They said if it's close to, if it's east, and then they said if it's in the middle, it's Middle East. They did that in the late 1800s. That has nothing to do with even the people that people will say are Israel. There, before there was a such thing as us thinking that Jewish people are Israel, there was no such thing as that. No such thing, right? We have this external evidence that we can easily look up. Oh, thank you. Was it something else? To be honest, again, that is to BH. So we have the proof, we have the evidence, the external evidence. Hello, Shalom, Sister Beverly. How you doing? Right? We have the external evidence on all these things, but we're having an argument that has nothing to do with us. That argument has nothing to do with us. That argument has nothing to do with us. Right? So, if we be honest about it, the external evidence is there, even for that, right? So people jump off right about, oh, so you're saying you're Jewish, blah blah. Of course, I'm not Jewish. Your question has to be, are Jewish people who you think they are? You're arguing the wrong thing. We talked about that yesterday. I don't know if it was yesterday in the rising or yesterday in the evening. Yesterday in the evening. Mythology, the study of the myth. You got to study the myth, and you got to study who created the myth. You have to study why they created the myth. You have to realize that there's only one interpretation, but many applications. Can you interpret the myth? Do you know how to interpret the myth? Do you know how to interpret the truth? And we're trying to make the myth like it's real talk, and we won't study it to see if there's things that are wrong with it. We just repeat the myth. And we repeat it so well that we begin to believe the myth is real. Right. We're fighting the wrong fight. So today, right, as you can see, this is something that even if somebody is not who they're saying that I'm claiming to be, right? Even if they're not them, we can see that somebody will automatically try to fight for something that's not even theirs. And the people who didn't even care about it, isn't worried about your value, overall, or not overall, mostly, right? Or at least the people that are the elite. And you're dealing with the people who enslaved you, but you want to talk to me about the fact that because I say that I'm Yashville, that I don't care about Africa. I can't be an Israelite without being African. It doesn't make sense. We live in the myth, right? We're dealing with external evidence today. They are the synagogue of Avat Satan, right? Avat, right? They are. It is mythical. It is mythical, right? It is mythical to be able to be. We have this argument that's mythical. We know who these people are. We know who owns the Federal Reserve. We know who owns the Bank of England, right? And we're regurgitating lies. We know it. It's known that Yashua was black. Amen. My wife just said in the comments, right? We know that, like it wasn't until somebody started going through. Yashua is the actual name of who people call Yesus or Yesu or Jesus, or Jesus, like Pegasus or Zeus himself, the demigod, right? We know where this stuff came from. We know that there's a such thing as iconoclast. Look up iconoclast. If you don't know what an iconoclast is, you want to comprehend iconoclastism. right? Which is a system of iconoclast now, or that iconoclast work with it. Now, what is an iconoclast? An iconoclast is somebody who basically goes back and changes icons. Right, an iconoclast is somebody who simply goes back and changes icons. There's external evidence. We know that there are people that were hired to make everything that looked one color look another color. We know that there are people who were hired to say that everything that used to be Afra has now become Jew. Matter of fact, we know that there's such thing. Like, this is not something that's news. Go look up Negro land on a map, 1700s Negro land. Underneath that is a place called Guinea, right where my tribe comes from. And you look in that area, you will discover in the 1700s, this was a European map, not even an African map. They have on the map, they said that right there are what? They said that those are the scattered Israelites. And they said that that's where the kingdom of Judah is. It's on a map. It's on a map. Right? You come from Senegal. Hello, how you doing? Welcome. Senegal in the house today, right? We have this thing, like, there's evidence there. We're arguing against evidence at this point. How you doing, Brother Cole? We're arguing against the evidence. We're arguing against the evidence. And if you have questions I'm not getting to right away, feel free to put it in the Q&A box. And as soon as I have a chance to come back to it, I will try my best to come back to it, right? But we have evidence there. Before we tied the Bible to Jews, before we tied the Bible to Christianity, there was a Bible. And we don't want to talk about those things. Right? We don't want to talk about those things. But before those things existed, there was a Tanakh, there was a Torah, there was a guide, there was a Zavad, there were scrolls. And for whatever reason, we want to act like that doesn't exist. And then we don't want to act like there aren't people who talked about these things outside of the scrolls as well. You said, is there evidence of the concept of Jewish or Judaism prior to Africa's colonization? Well, first of all, that's once again another question. I guess the assumption is that Judaism is what I believe. I don't believe in Judaism. I'm not Jewish. I'm not a Jew. So what I speak of is something that exists before Jews would have even began to say that they believe what I believe. And so we're going to talk about that. Yes, plenty of evidence. First of all, if we're going to talk about it, you can't talk about Yashtel once again without talking about Kemet and without talking about Cush. And by the way, in the Bible and also outside the Bible, thank you again for the love, in the Bible and also outside the Bible, we have documented to where when Babylon tried to attack Yashtel or Israel, we have documented when Cush and Kemet would come to fight. We also have documented that Israel, that people, when they would scatter sometimes, or when they would just leave to go other places, they would also go over to West Africa way before what we would call, the birth of Christ, or the year zero, if you will. We know these things already. So we already have that. We have people in Carthage telling you that they are. Now remember you have the I'm sorry, what's the Punic Wars. The only reason why we say Punic is because people say Punic, right? Because they say Punic Wars, and people say Punic, right? Or I'm sorry, we say Punic, but it really was Punic. But remember, Romans didn't care about how you pronounce somebody else's stuff. So they said Punic, and now you still say Punic. But it was Punic because these people who were Carthaginian, right? Hannibal, and we know Hannibal was North African. We know he was dark-skinned. His coins show us that, right? Not the modern coins they've made. Look up the ancient coins, and you would discover the color of Hannibal pretty easily, right? So if you look at, or at least his facial features, okay? So if you look at Hannibal, and then you'll see that Hannibal, Punic, right? Punic was Punician. That's why they said it was the Punic Wars or the Punic Wars, because they were Punician or Punician. Who are the Punicians? The Punicians are people that were from Canaan, or Canaan, or Canaan, or what you would call Canaanites. The Canaanite people had no problem telling you, as Phoenicians, that they were mixed with Israel. The Israelites had no problem telling you that they originally were in the land of Goshen, came out of that land of Goshen, came back to came back there and were mixed with Kemetic and Cushitic blood, bare minimum, right? We can talk about Put as well and other things as well, right? But we can say that with certainty that we know that that's there. So they're legit. If you're just simply going off of what people are saying, whether it's outside the Bible, inside the Bible, we already have this thing that tells us that yeah, people knew who these people were before the letter J existed. There were already these people, and they already had a belief system, right? The letter J is part of somebody else's culture, and that whole Judaism thing is somebody telling you, "Oh yeah, this is what we're going to do with your culture." But no, I'm not into Judaism because that's not the system in which I worship. The system in which my people adhere to. Matter of fact, Olawada, or I'm sorry, Olawada Equiano, right, has a book written as a former in chattel slavery, former slave, taken as a young prince. He didn't remember at first, but taken as a young boy, brought over to the Americas, is a slave. By the time he's age 20, he's been a sailor as a slave, and he's been able to buy his own freedom. Carves out a nice little niche for himself. Is free. He begins to read this Bible because he keeps hearing people talk about this Bible. So he said, "Let me read this Bible to see what everybody's talking about." He reads it, and he starts having, and you can read his book. He said autobiography, and he starts saying, "You know what? This is interesting because I keep seeing this stuff. I keep hearing about, milk and honey and this and that and the culture and everything." And he started thinking back to his childhood. He was like, "Wait a minute! Before they took me, this is what we did." He was like, "Oh yeah," and I remember, like I guess I was like what you would call a prince. I was under the chieftain, this and that or whatever. He's like, "Man, you know what? I am an Israelite. This is me." He read the Bible, was able to use the Bible to actually give him flashbacks, right? DNA memory in its most sincere form, right? His own DNA memory, and said, "Hey, this is who I am. This is who my people are." And wrote it in the book to ensure that people would not just remember his personal story, but they would remember who he is. Now, what I worship, by the way, means extreme respect. So who I extremely respect and the culture and of the kingdom that comes to is of the only wise Yahweh Alacham, who is different than God, who is different than a Netcha, who is different than all these other spiritual beings that we have, that's different than, these succubuses and incubuses and all these different things. You said Carthage is modern day Tunisia. Tunisians are not black. First of all, Carthage went all the way from Spain, all the way through, like touching up and basically kissing Kemet, like right next to Kemet. So if you're going to talk about modern day Tunisia and all that, number one, Tunisia is not the same thing Carthage was. Secondly, if you're going to talk about Carthaginians fought in the Punic War because they were Phoenician. All right. And thirdly, we're not going to act like everybody in North Africa are the original people that are there. That's like saying that the Egyptians that exist now in Egypt are the original Kemetic people. That's a lie. That's like saying the Americans that are in America now are the original Americans, when the definition of an original American is um, is a copper colored person indigenous to the Americas. All right. That was what white people wrote down as their definition. So, and that's like trying to say that Israelites are Jews when Jews and Israelites are not the same people, when Jews themselves have written documentation of how they enslaved Israelites and told you what they did to them. So we're not going to do this weird thing that just because somebody lives in a space now, that's like saying that, hey, we have this property that we're at, and this is our property. Yeah, somebody lived there before, but no, this always belonged to us. It doesn't make sense. Right, we got to get out of this 14th Amendment thing that we've been taught. How you doing, Erdogan? This 14th Amendment thing that says that because somebody claims something, it means that it's automatically so. That's why we talked about mythology last night, the study of the myth. Let's study the myth to see if it's real. Okay, we know, for example, when it comes to Carthage, we know this. We have it written down. We have it documented. All right, we have it documented because a lot of people who are into Greco-Roman and romantic values and stuff today say, hey, if it's not documented by certain people, it don't exist, right? Okay, we know today, not yesterday, not just found out. We know, not I'm thinking about it, not it's coming up. I'm talking about right now. You can look it up. We know today that when Rome defeated Carthage, ultimately, right, years after the second Hannibal, right, the one that we all give the credit to, Hannibal Barca, right, before that second Hannibal, years after the second Hannibal, excuse me, we know that they eventually came to the capital of Carthage. They had to move it to Spain at one point, and then they moved it back. But we know that in Carthage, they came and they destroyed it. The Romans said that it was so bad, it was like blood was like up to their ankles and stuff, and everybody had blood upon them, and they killed everybody and everything. And then it said that they salted the earth so that nothing would grow. It's documented. And then Julius Caesar and Julius Caesar's wife began to have dreams about Carthage and how they needed to make sure they became a city. They went back. They made sure that they got things to be able to grow and stuff again. They built things again, and then they put people there. But those people were Romans. They were not Carthaginians. So the people that existed back at Julius Caesar's time who lived there were no longer Carthaginians. They were, in fact, Romans. Now, later on, Moors would have something to say about that. Then you might see a little bit of Carthaginian blood pop back, but we know that that's not the same people. So to say that just because people in Tunisia are not what you consider to be black, by the way, because there are people who are part of the community, part of SOC, part of the people listening right now, who have told us stories about how they've gone back to places like Morocco and other places like there, and you would think, oh, you're not going to see anybody. And then people who are working there that look like us won't even talk to some of the other people coming from other countries who don't look like us, but they see us, and all of a sudden they perk up and they say, what's up? They give you a pound and stuff. And then when other people show back up, they go right back to being who they are. So just because you're not aware of something doesn't mean that I'm not knowledgeable about something or that it doesn't exist. I would say study to show yourself approved, and then bring it before Elohim so that you can be a workman and need not be ashamed and rightly divide the word of truth. My wife said we have to look at native ancient populations in countries that now have white majority inhabitants. Yeah. And by the way, that's the same kind of rhetoric that the guy wrote in his manifesto. I didn't read all 800 pages, but I read enough of it to get the gist. And the guy wrote in his manifesto, we have to stop black people, or we have to stop, what did he call us? He didn't call us colonizers, what was it? Replacers. He said that we got to stop these replacers from replacing us in white nations. They're not white nations. And if anybody's the replacer, you are. Right? But we shouldn't think about you as a replacer, this and that. Like at the end of the day, if we're trying to be human beings, why not think of everybody as human and throw all that away? Right? Even if that's not what your belief, thank you, Bounty, appreciate it. Even if that's not your belief system, we got an issue going on. If that's what you're doing, you coming from a belief system, you might want to check it. Who wrote that? Why did they write it? Shabbat Shalom, Sister Barbara, how you doing? My wife said we could list our countries and show the population change black to white. America, yep, Australia, South Africa. People say, oh, I'm more African than you because I was born there. Elon Musk, he's more African than you. Man, get out of here. Elon Musk's family benefits from beating the brakes off of black folk. And y'all still support that man. But they want to come and talk like we saying something wrong. Said you can't comprehend how people show up unarmed. I'm just saying, like this is stuff you can look up, right? People acting like I'm just pulling this out of nowhere. Like, no. Like, look at the word Punic Wars. It was the Punic Wars. It is because they were Punician. Now you call them Phoenician, right? But you got to recognize that. And colonization is very old. Always study. How you doing, Minister Sonia? Mr. T says, no matter who it is, if you're drained all the blood from your body, you will not live. What does that have to do with anything we're talking about? Of course, you shouldn't drain the blood from anybody's body, and you shouldn't drain the truth from the story of mankind. So yeah, I agree with you. So just because you shouldn't drain the blood from somebody's body doesn't mean that we shouldn't call. So if what you're saying, like, I don't comprehend, like I'm not trying to say it's quite Dunning-Kruger effect, but there's some cognitive dissonance going on because that's supposed to tell me that therefore I shouldn't speak on the stuff. Like, no, like, look, my people have done bad things to my people. Look, check this out. See, I'm mixed with a lot of different things. That's one of the reasons why I'm able to actually talk about things culturally from the perspective of many people who are able to either show me these things or give me, a key to be able to look back at some things, right? I'm part Cherokee. I'm also part Twi. I'm also part, West African. Guess what Cherokee people did? Cherokee people at first fought against the social construct, white men, right? But then Cherokee people also eventually had to bow down and started being taught that what white men, social construct, right, were saying, right? Because we know not all white people believe the same thing. But, so guess what they had to do? They began to cook and to clean and to act like white men. And then they even began white men that wanted them to be in line with them, they said, hey, you can own slaves too. They just got to be African slaves. And so my people, Cherokee, owned my people, Africans, and took them across that. When that Trail of Tears happened, it was not just the native people that we talk about that went across there. It was also the West African people who went across there. Right? They went across together. And then later on, they tried to fight for the Confederacy, even still, but they wouldn't let them. Lincoln came and took the little bit of land they had been given that they had to stay in and shrunk it even more, and then told them you got to get rid of the slaves. They let go of the slaves, and then the slaves married in to the natives. So just within myself, I've got to be honest about the positive and the negative, right? But it doesn't mean that the Cherokee side of me, who drained the blood from the African side of me, don't deserve to be able to be called out for it. That doesn't make any sense. So just because we say something is reality and that we should talk about it doesn't mean, that we hate everybody. It means that we're calling out the truth. And if I can't call out the truth in myself, then how dare I call out the truth in you? If it's even your truth. It might not be your truth. It might not be your grandmama or your great grandmama's truth. But let's be honest about it. This thing, people don't want to talk about it because we got to be real. You step on toes. When you're real, you cause division. When you're real, people think that, hey, we shouldn't cause division. No, we shouldn't cause division if it's based off of falsehoods, or we shouldn't be dividing stuff just because we might not share the same belief. But when it comes to giving you a truth or a fact, and you're going to divide yourself because you don't like the truth, or you're going to try to like cancel people in this cancel culture system because you don't like the truth, then you got to figure out what's wrong with you. That's a spirit that you got to deal with. How you doing, Alan? Right? You got to come to the right thing. You got to come to the knowledge of what's happening. You have to be obedient to this stuff. Color is not important. Okay, it's not important to you. Right? But if you go out here and you see all this green and this life behind me and stuff, if it's not green, then it ain't healthy. If it's not green, it lacks magnesium. Color is important. If I'm looking for certain things to see if it's poisonous or not, I will look at the color of it because it's important. It doesn't mean that that my black color is more important than your white color, but it's important. If you're gonna love me, how can you say that you love me? See, this is when people do the whole colorblind and this and that or whatever, and they say, I don't see color, I see your heart. Do you not know that my heart, which is an organ, pales in comparison as far as size to the biggest organ in my body? The biggest organ in my body is my skin. Why, if you're going to ignore the biggest part of me, then how can you see the smallest part of me, figuratively or otherwise? It doesn't make sense. We're saying things as if we say this. We're all mixed. Okay. And right? If you're colorblind, that's considered to be something that's wrong. You should go to the doctor if you're colorblind. Right? If you can't see color, they would say something's not right with you. You're not an animal. Right? There are certain animals that are supposed to be colorblind. You are not supposed to be. It doesn't mean that just because you see somebody's color, you should love or hate them based upon their color. That's the problem. You're trying to take something and misrepresent, or you're trying to take something and use definitions that aren't even there. That's not how we define things. Right, exactly. Don't look at me with your eyes closed. I like that, Sister Sheena. Don't look at me with your eyes closed. You said so. To not see color is to okay. Well, if you don't believe that color doesn't matter, then you don't believe in natural law. If you don't believe in natural law, that's your ability to do so. But there's external evidence that says that people said that color was okay. Heck, Revelation chapter 1, verse 14 and 15. Yahshua showed that color was okay. He didn't present himself as white. The word white, by the way, doesn't mean a color. The word white actually just means, so there's no such thing as a white person anyway. That's why I keep saying white social construct. There's no such thing as a white person anyways. We know this, right? But the word white was brought up by people who want you to believe in manifest destiny or the white man's burden. Rudyard Kipling, who wrote The Jungle Book, wanted you to believe in what? And he said, hey, America, you guys are becoming the power. Make sure you teach manifest destiny. That whole Jungle Book story is about manifest destiny. And by the way, that's just a small snippet of the whole story. Read the whole book. Right? If you talk about Darwinism, Darwin's book, The Origin of Species, the theory of evolution, or sorry, the origin of species, the origin of species, the theory of evolution, the struggle for survival of favored races. You said Jesus. Well, first of all, Jesus wasn't described because his name isn't Jesus. The letter J didn't exist. His name isn't Jesus. So half man, half Zeus is something else. Number one. So if you're going to read a Bible written about Jesus, and then you're going to tell me about Jesus, well, Jesus is not the same as Yahshua. Secondly, though, Yahshua himself is described in Revelation 1, chapter 1, verses 14 and 15. Yahshua is hidden in Kemet, which shows that he would have looked like Kemetic people. What did Kemetic people look like at that time? Not the people you're saying now whose second language is French, which shows you that they're not Kemetic, but the people of actual Kemet who still exist there in southern Egypt. What did they look like? What do they look like now? What is their beauty standard? Why was he hidden there? Why did his mom and his dad be able to hide there? Why does it talk about people that he came from had locks in their hair? Because he was an Israelite, and the Bible describes them having locks. Who do you think those people were? What do you think they looked like? By the way, it doesn't mention it as a big thing because it doesn't say this means that he's better than you because of how he looked, but it does describe how his people look. Yeah, I just quoted from the Bible. I'm using the Bible now. And I don't understand what your thing is. So you see what I'm saying? Like the fight that's going on is that people don't even want to look at the external evidence. They don't want to look at the evidence in the Bible, first of all. It's hard to even get to the external when we won't even deal with the actual Bible. What did Flavius Josephus look like? Because that was who I was going to mention from this book that we're using, right? What did Flavius Josephus look like? He was an Israelite. What did he look like? And by the way, it still doesn't even matter if you were to be honest, because see, that's when we go to, well, I won't say it doesn't matter, but it matters as far as if we're going to talk about who Israel is, because Revelation chapter 7 tells you that Israel has to be sealed before others can be grafted in. Well, I don't know if I've said race. It's been brought up to me, race. I don't think I've said race, but even if you talk about race, fine. We're talking about the social construct, and that's what I mean, right? I'm talking about tribe. That's what I've been talking about. If you want to talk about the tribe or where somebody comes from, what did they look like? I didn't mention the word race, outside of possibly talking about racism, but I'm pretty sure so far it is rising. I haven't said anything about race. But if you're talking about quoting from the Bible, yeah, Revelation 1, 14 and 15 says, no, well, oh, okay, I get what you're saying. You're saying that I said if you're going to read a Bible about Jesus, yeah, a Bible about Jesus is not the same Bible about Yahshua. For example, Mr. T, if you don't mind, or Mr. T, Jerry, whatever it is, I apologize. I don't want to misquote your name, but I would like to ask you a question. What is the first word of the Bible? I would just like to ask a question. What is the first word of the Bible, if you're still there? What is the first word? Because even before we talk about external evidence, if you want to turn this into biblical evidence, I don't mind rolling. We can roll with the questions a little bit, right? We can come back to this a little bit tomorrow if we don't hit some of the stuff. We kind of hit some of the stuff I wanted to already. But, what's the first word of the Bible? Right? Because you're talking about this Bible, I don't think you comprehend the difference when I say that Bible written about Jesus and that Bible written about Yahshua are two different things going on. They're two different interpretations. There's people trying to interpret through their own culture. Right? So Badashat is the first word of the Bible, which means that the book of Genesis is called Badashat. If you don't know that, and if you don't know that Badashat literally means Bet, Aleph, Resh, Shin, Yod, Tav. The son who comes out the right family is one with the Father. Therefore, the son who comes out the right family is one with the Father, who is our head. Therefore, being destroyed for us, being led to the Tav, or to the mark, or to where it's finished, or to the cross. That is the first word of the Bible, Badashat. So if you don't know that, I'm trying to tell you that you probably don't know what I'm talking about when I'm saying the difference between Jesus and Yahshua. Two different cultures, two different reads, the same book supposedly, but obviously not the same. Now you're getting into somebody else's translation, or not even translation, somebody else's interpretation. But interpretation by definition can only be what the person originally meant by it, and then you take what they originally meant and read it out. So yes, Badashit can be translated to in beginning. There's no the, because we don't have a the or a or anything like that in our language, right? But Badashat is talking about in beginning and telling you what's going on. So we have to be in this position where we comprehend when we're looking at external evidence first. We got to at least be honest about the biblical evidence, right? We got to at least say what the Bible says. If we can't even say what the Bible says, we're lost already. If we can't say what the Bible says, we're done already. If we can't say what the Bible says, we're gonna miss already, right? We're already missing. You say color doesn't matter, color's never mentioned, blah, blah, but we know that Yahshua went to Kemet. He was hidden in Kemet. He was not a white person. And people say, oh, the people who are in Israel, they're not white. No, bro, like they deal with sun cancer, right? Just because they might have some tan and stuff, we know that Jewish people, Ashkenazi, Khazarian, we know where they come from. Matter of fact, they were on maps as around the 1200s. Some even go before that, but I can't remember the specific ones right there. But they were on maps going back to the 1200s, to where you can actually look up where they were, and they were labeled as things close to Jew or you or things like that, to eventually become Jew. They didn't go from Israel or North Africa or all that, and they're still trying to be there now. One of the things they're dealing with, besides one of the main things killing them are like sexual, STDs and things like that. One of the biggest killers over there is skin cancer, because they can't deal with the sun, right? And exactly, and that's where I was going, Minister Tamer. When we go to the external evidence, there's external evidence, because sometimes the evidence that you're right is the fact that people won't even allow something simplistic to like seep in, right? As far as being sensical, if his color doesn't matter, then why do you keep fighting against his color? If it doesn't matter, then why can't he be black? If anything, if you say his color doesn't matter, then hey, make him black, make him white, make him Asian. It doesn't matter. But you can't do that, because that means we're not being in truth. So we say we'll escape the conversation about it, which once we finish the conversation, it should be as simple as, okay, cool, we got that out the way. Now, how can we make sure that he's the savior of all? Why is it that when he was put up as white, nobody had a conversation about it, because it was okay for him to be the savior of all, but somebody says he got some hue in that man, and now all of a sudden, he can't be the savior of all. Hey, what's up, Chris? Right? I meant to text you yesterday. Hope you're doing well, though. Might try to reach out a little bit, or at least see what your schedule's looking like next week, but try to reach out, right? So we have this thing, right? And we have people like Flavius Josephus, right? Flavius Josephus, people like Flavius Josephus who literally are considered to be, he's a first century, so he was around in the first century. The first century is 0 to 1, right? 0 to 100 rather. So he lived through this stuff, and he wrote as a historian, and he documented what happened to Israel and to Rome and all the stuff that was going on at that time. This is outside. Now, I actually consider Flavius Josephus to be canon, because it's interesting that the world says that his history, everything he says about history is true considering Rome, but then they say when it comes to Israel, we shouldn't listen to anything he has to say. Very interesting that Flavius Josephus, who is an Israelite, who would have been what you consider by the social, if we use the social construct, you would have considered him black, and he tells you the truth about his people, and you say, oh, that's false. But when he says the truth about Rome, people say, let's listen to him. External evidence, something's going on. This isn't what you would call Bible, right? This isn't what you would call Bible. But in the external test, right? Because the scriptures, I'm reading from the book, once again, the book we're using for some of these things apologetically. And by the way, see, I'm willing to use a book with white people on the cover who wrote it, because I'm okay with listening to white people. Okay? I'm about truth. All right. Even if I don't agree with every word and every name and all that they use, if they say something that's real, I'm gonna study it to show myself approved, bring it before Yahweh. And if it's real, then it's real. Right? So it's Flavius, Flavius. And I say Josephus, they would have said Josephus. There was no J sound, but Josephus. But they would spell it Josephus, Joseph with a us at the end. Flavius Josephus, right? And that's not his real name either, but that's what he's known by. That's his romantic name, right? They don't even give you his Israelite name, right? But nevertheless, it'll be easier for you to find Flavius Josephus. So look it up. They'll probably give you his Israelite name if you look it up in certain places, okay? But so the historicity, or the historicity, excuse me, I guess, the historicity of Yahshua is well established by early Roman, Greek, and Avda or Hebrew or Israelite sources. And these extra biblical writings affirm the major details of what you guys call by the Nicolaitan doctrine New Testament, because there's no such thing as a New Testament when the Bible was written. That's something somebody wrote into. Okay, so as we keep on looking at these things, it says, I'm sorry, it says the first century Avda historian or Israelite historian Flavius Josephus made specific references to John the Baptist. This is outside of the Bible. Where is this? Is this written in the Bible? No, Flavius Josephus, who you don't think of as Bible, but I would consider him to be canon, right? Not even a lost book. It's a book that's out there, but we don't think of him as even being Israelite because we only think of his Roman name, and we don't even think that he's correct because people that are into Romans will tell you that everything he says about Romans is true, but everything he says about you is not factual, right? But he makes references to who? In the first century, outside the Bible, talking about all history, he also says things about your history. And he makes references to who? Specific references to John the Baptist. So he references John the Baptist and what they would call history. So even in his story, it matches up in our story. He makes references to who? All right. He makes references to John the Baptist. He makes references to Yahshua HaMashiach and James in his Antiquities of the Israelites or of the Hebrews. He makes references in his book that he did to make sure that we could go back and read the history. In this work, Josephus gave us many background details about the Herods. So he told us, so a lot of stuff that you guys hear talk about Herod and stuff like that, we know it because not the Bible says it, because Flavius Josephus said it. That's the key. That might be a key component for some of us that don't know about him. So he's the reason why we know that Herod was a Gens or a Gentile, and that he wasn't even an Israelite. And that's why people didn't like Herod. And it was sad that the Pharisees, Sadducees, and scribes were sucking up to him. And he was part of a family, of the royal family. That meant that, Caligula and all them cats, right, were his family members, right? He going around trying to kill every firstborn, reading what Kemet did to your people, right? Because they liked to study Kemet. So it means that when he talked about killing the firstborn, he looked at with the story, your stories. He looked up the Kemetic stories of what happened, therefore affirming that Kemetic people went through the process of doing that to Hebrew people. Flavius Josephus ties that together for us as well, just like your Bible already said. Interesting, right? Okay. He says that it also talks about the Sadducees and the Pharisees. So a lot of stuff we know about Sadducees and Pharisees are not just because the Bible says, it's because somebody outside of what you call the Bible, right? Because I tell you the Bible is law and case study. You can study the case of the story of mankind, and you can look at how the laws are there supposed to be able to protect us. But it tells you, Flavius Josephus, he wrote it out for you, right? He wrote it out for us. It also said he gave background and details about the high priest, like Ananias, right, or Anas, and I'm sorry, the high priest, excuse me, the high priest Anas and Caiaphas or Caiaphas, right? So we know about the high priest. He's talking about the high priest. He's not basing this off the Bible. He's basing this off of his everyday living there experience. It also says he talks about Roman emperors mentioned in Gospels and in Acts. So if you want to know who the Roman emperors were that are being talked about in the book of Acts and the book of Romans, you got to read Flavius Josephus. We have external evidence. People are trying to argue because they don't want to look at the evidence. They don't want to simply go through and read and see what's there. And when they do read it, once again, they'll say, oh, well, when he's talking about your people, he's a liar. But when he's talking about Rome, he's telling the truth. But then we got cognitive dissonance, because if that's so, then why is it when he talks about your Roman emperors and he says that these are the people that were being dealt with in Romans and Acts, why is it all of a sudden that you say that that's not true? We got a problem. Okay. We find another early secular reference to Yahshua in a letter written a little later, after the year 73 AC, by an imprisoned Syrian named Marabar Serapion. This letter to his son compares the deaths of Socrates, Pythagoras, and the Messiah. Y'all catch that? So this person wrote a letter to his child and said, hey man, when Yahshua died, in my mind, I compare it to Socrates, which y'all will say, who you guys have no problem saying he's real, to Pythagoras, who you guys have no problem saying is real. He said, I compared the death of the Messiah to him. This is not a Bible reference. This is not a scroll. This is an epistle, but this is an epistle from a father to his son. From a father to son. This is like a father picking up the phone, either calling or calling whatever generation you with, right? Calling his son and saying, hey dad, this is blah 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 blah. Right? This is what's going on. I'm sorry, hey son, how you doing? Well, about this and things or whatever. Man, yeah, there's some tough times and there's death going on in the family. Man, when it comes to death, man, think about Socrates, think about Pythagoras, think about Yahshua. Right? It says other first and second century. So now we're getting into the 0 to 100 and the 100 to 200. Other first and second century writers who mention the Messiah all include the Roman historians Cornelius Tacitus, right, and Suetonius. And so Cornelius writes something called the Annals, Annals, and Suetonius has something called the Life of Claudius and Lives of the Caesars. So watch this. The Roman governor, Planter, also has something that's in something called the Epistle. And the Greek satirist Lucian, that's in something called On the Death of Peregrine. Right? So he's mentioned in all those places. Yahshua is also mentioned a number of times in the Jewish Talmud. Now, the Jewish Talmud is different than the Bible. But Jewish people, the people of Israel, they don't follow the Tanakh or the Torah. They follow the Talmud. The Talmud is a lot different. We can talk about that maybe in this frequently asked questions series 2. We're going to be in this for a while. I can see that already, right? But you see those things, right? So we see all these things in the history. People that lived at the time, people that are Israel, people that aren't Israel, are mentioning Yahshua, and are not just mentioning Yahshua randomly or just saying he's a myth or just saying no. They're saying like, yeah, he's real. Like he was somebody who was physically here. He's somebody you could have reached out and touched the hem of his garment. He's somebody that we know that there was an episode that happened in Israel where all of Israel went crazy one night over this dude named Yahshua. And when he died, they compared him to real people. So he was a real person that they said, yeah, his death, his real death. So when people say, oh, well, he never lived, well, then how did he die? Right? How did he die? People will say he couldn't have died and been resurrected because he never existed. He never lived. But if he died, then we got to start thinking, well, if he died, then he must have lived and maybe he was resurrected. Right? There is external evidence. We talked about earlier, Olawudach Equiano. There's external evidence. We talked about earlier that people that say that they're Jews now and are not, right? Because they're really not Israelites, but the people who say that they are Jews and Jews are the real chosen people. And thank you to Toshiba, appreciate you. Thank you. People that say that Jews are the chosen people, those Jews have written documents that said that they actually enslaved the chosen people. Don't forget, you have 2nd Esdras, chapter 13, verses 40 through 45. I mention that constantly because people don't get into their word outside of just the 66 books. But I mentioned that one because that's also another detail where you will see that they mentioned the land of Asherah. And when you look at, matter of fact, even when you look in the movie about Christopher Columbus, you will hear them talk about the land of Asherah. The land of Asherah was supposed to be the place to where the 9 tribes who had first scattered, before the last 3 tribes would be scattered, they went to go to. And so when Columbus was chosen by the queen, and the queen went to the Pope, and the Pope said, you can go get these people as long as you give us some of these slaves you're going to get. They were looking for the people who went to the land of Asherah because they thought that they were going there to get treasure, but their treasure that they were looking for, Israel was looking for, was supposed to be able to get back in touch with the Most High. But they went treasure hunting and they were going to enslave them. And that's what Christopher Columbus did. And matter of fact, since he knew he was going to need to talk to them at first to get them to be at ease before he went ahead and just outright took over, he talked to them with what? An Israelite or an Avda or a Hebrew interpreter. He brought a Hebrew interpreter to be able to make sure he spoke to those people. Oh, hey, how you doing, Ms. Mac? Ms. Mac out there picking flowers, violets today. Amen. Right? Like these are things. Actually, my wife, she makes a, I believe, right? Isn't it, babe? You make a violet. Is it a violet syrup or something like that? I believe so. Right? You've sold that a couple times in the past. But yeah, like these are things that we're not aware of. These are things that we're not aware of, and it's right there. It's written out for you. They came here looking for Israelites. They brought an Israelite interpreter. And even though the people didn't speak full Israelite by the time, or at least the same, kind of dialect, they were able to comprehend one another because they brought the Israelite interpreter. It's like the external evidence is massive. Matter of fact, do you know how I know that they believe that people out here don't believe the nonsense of, or at least didn't used to believe the nonsense of? Oh, Ms. Mac, Maya said she wishes she could she wants to join you in picking those violets. If you want to know the evidence of it, you know why there's even people that where the whole Hebrew Israelite, or Black Hebrew Israelite thing actually comes from when they started calling us that. Right? Oh, okay, there she goes, Miss Mac. She's over in the chats now. Right? You know why they call us Black Hebrew Israelites? You want to know? And why now we become, if you say that you're Black, if you say you're a Hebrew, and if you say you're an Israelite, they try to say that they're coming for you, FBI, CIA, stuff like that. Now they got you on the hate list and all that. But you want to know where that even comes from? It comes from that there was a guy. This is where this whole thing of like they try to say, if you're in Puerto Rico, you're this tribe, and if you're in America, you're this tribe, and if you're in, Haiti, you're this tribe, and if you're in Cuba, you're this tribe. That's where this all comes from, the same place. There was a guy who was trying to help us to get back reparations. He was trying to get us reparations. And we couldn't get reparations. They had gotten rid of the 40 acres and a mule by now, right? They had stopped letting you be freedmen. Now you had to be their version of an American with that fake birth certificate thing, right? And they had changed stuff up, and now people were looking for reparations and saying, "Why did you take them?" And so he said, "Okay, they won't give it to us because of what they did to us as far as being African, but I see that they give money to white folk." And so this is where all these people who are now Moors to say, don't be a non-citizen national, don't be this and that. You got to be a Moor, be a Moor, be a Moor. And I ain't mad at it. If you're a Moor, hey, as long as you're not, part of the wicked, corrupt system, be you, right? But here's where that happened. Here's where that happened, right? This guy basically said, okay, they won't give us what it is as far as us being Black, but we know that we're Israel, right? And so since we're Israel, and we know that there's proof and evidence documented that they took Israelites and made them slaves, maybe we can show them as being Israelites that we deserve to be free, right? Or we deserve some type of reparation, or we deserve some type of land. And so that's what he did. Is he actually, now, to be honest, to be fair, he kind of made up not kind of, you can't kind of make up a lie. So he made up a lie. He based it off the truth. But he said, okay, so y'all in Puerto Rico, we're just going to say y'all are this. And y'all who are this. And he said, hey, you know what? They're going to be white people who are going to say that we ain't really helping y'all because y'all Black. So we'll go ahead and go. And this is where the lie comes up that helped the Jews to be able to get power eventually. He said, okay, we'll say some of y'all over in Europe. We'll say some of you guys are a tribe too. That's what he did, and to try and get reparations. It failed, and now you have people who started saying, who kind of like, man, okay, being an Israelite, they don't get nothing either. But later on, a lot of people took those same things that he did, and they began to give you some of the more harsh camps and groups or whatever you want to call them that are out there to this day. But that's not how that started. That's not how that started. Or I'm sorry, that's how all that started. So we think it started just because black people just started saying, okay, we're going to take, that's what white people want you to believe. Social construct white, right? Certain white people from the social construct want you to believe, or even certain black Christians want you to believe that we are making this up. There's none of this. There's no external evidence, et cetera, right? But there is tons of external evidence that says the contrary, right? And remember that people didn't even think about Jews going to Israel until World War II. Now, I know they keep telling us this thing and they keep saying, stop bringing up old stuff and you're bringing up stuff that's old and this stuff doesn't really matter as much, yada, yada, yada. I know they keep doing that to us. But for real, how long ago really is 1940? The 1940s, the end of the 1930s. Let's go back to just 1942 because that just makes the math easier. 1942 is 80 years ago. Do you know anybody that could possibly be 80 years old? Do you think your parents might have known somebody who possibly could have lived, 80 years before then? So it wasn't that long ago that it would have been nonsensical to say that a Jewish person actually followed your belief system. It wouldn't have been that long ago. Exactly. That's what I was saying earlier. Manifestos, the slave ships with people of Hebrew names, and there's a lot of Jewish people who are over there. Matter of fact, little quiet is kept. David Duke over the KKK, or at least, a big part of being over the KKK. I don't know if he's the main guy, but he's one of the most public figures ever, ran for president and everything, and got a lot of votes. Right. But anyways, and ran for governor. I don't know if he made governor, but ran for mayor or something. He made one of them, I think, one time. But David Duke, when you look at him, David Duke is somebody who massive white supremacist, all that. And people got mad at him, but he actually told the truth. This is why I say lies are even based off the truth. He told the truth. He said, why are y'all coming at us talking about slavery? And people got mad at him. And he was, he was gaslighting. He's trying to get the focus off of them because obviously they're white social construct. There are many different cultures that enslaved people of color, right, that work together. But the whole white man's burden to manifest destiny kind of bunched them into one, right? However, David Duke came out and told you, by the way, the same thing that Farrakhan told you, which got black people that hate Farrakhan and white people that hate Duke. And they were both saying the same thing. And they're as opposite, at least so you think, on as opposite side of the spectrum as they possibly could be. Right? However, they both came out and told you a truth that got them a lot of hate, which is, and that's why they tried to pull Farrakhan off of what was it, Facebook or YouTube for a minute or something, but they didn't do anything to David Duke. But they both said the same thing. And what did they say? They both came out and said that, hey, that the biggest slave masters in America were Ashkenazi and Khazarian. They were Jews. They said, that the people who had made the most money off of the slave trade, off of those slave ships, they were Jews. They told you that, and there's books written on it. Outside of them, there's books written on it. You can read it. They said, hey, that they used to trade Jewish wine for slaves. They told you. And people got upset and frustrated. Oh, okay, you just hate each other, blah, blah. It's like, no, look it up. We know this, right? Don't forget, we talked about this last night. Look at the Bering Strait and the things that we find down in the water. Look in Cherokee land and see if you don't find artifacts that have Paleo Hebrew. Look in Indiana, Illinois, same places where the pyramids are, and see if you don't find stuff there. Look at when the slaves were freed, when we were actual freedmen, and when we started building our own assemblies and churches that looked like synagogues, really, and look at those churches and see if you don't see Paleo Hebrew writing on them. This is evidence. This is external evidence. We don't have to just say. See, that's why the Bible is law and case study. We think that the Bible only is just supposed to be kept in and of itself. The Bible, that's why it keeps talking about your future. That's why you can deal with prophecy in there. Because there's still stuff. There's still stuff out there that we see in. Right? Flavius Josephus, he didn't go, okay, Revelation is the last book. right? Because don't forget, their revelation used to be Daniel and Ezekiel and Isaiah. But just because that's there didn't mean they stopped writing. There's still evidence written out of our people. That's why I talk about it. People think when I'm talking about chattel slavery, they think that I'm talking about something that's outside the Bible. The Bible didn't stop at Revelation chapter 22. Uh-oh. That's why you got to get out them 66 books. And that's the only thing you ever study. I'm not saying that don't make sure that you're aware of the culture of the 66 books, right? But you got to comprehend that this thing is continuing to be written, right? There might only be 28 chapters in Acts, but you're supposed to write Acts chapter 29. Keep doing them Acts. Keep seeing what's going on. Keep seeing what's happened. Keep seeing how you can be better. Keep seeing how you can get out of the generational curses. Keep seeing how you can feed others and bless others and pray for others. This didn't stop just because it's finished. It is finished, by the way. That means that now you should be able to be more bold. When it comes to even people that talk about the law and all that stuff, first of all, we're still in the law. But even if you're talking about the law, look, the law is the tightrope, right? And so the law is there, protect your rights, stay on the tightrope, this and that or whatever. But if you fall, Yahshua is there to catch you with the safety net. That's the grace that's there. So the law and grace have to go together, right? You can do the work, stay on the tightrope, but if you fall down, your faith will be able to catch you on the tight or on the net under the tightrope and put you right back in place. How you doing, Sister Lord? Right? We have all this external evidence to become curse breakers. Amen. We have all this external evidence, but we won't read. We have all this external evidence of what people tell you in the 1900s they believe about what the earth looks like. And their Bible says the same thing. Four corners, foundation, sun moves around, moon moves around. Didn't say, hey, keep the earth from rotating. It said, keep the sun still. And the same people would say, well, that's Moses. He's old, blah, blah. Well, if you guys believe that the people who built the pyramids believed that the earth was round and Moses was taught by them, then why would he be asking for the earth to not stay still? Or why wouldn't he ask earth stay still? Why would he say sun stay still? Do you not know that noonday is based upon, see, it's just reading about the history, you know, even his story mentions this, but reading about our story and seeing the sun come up right above, and they would call that noon because noon was at her highest peak with the sun upon her head. I'm not telling you this stuff because like we talked about this a little bit last night in the 1900s. People say you're crazy to believe the Bible says this and that or whatever. You guys are foolish, this and that or whatever. You guys are just believing whatever a church tells you. Interestingly enough, it was the Roman Catholic Church who kind of forced somebody's writings who didn't want to be out there and didn't really believe in them like that. They forced his writings out and they said, hey, everybody needs to believe this writing that says the earth is now round. And if you look at when we bring up Martin Luther as this hero, Martin Luther was the one that came out and said, hey, if y'all keep teaching this stuff about this cosmology, this global cosmology, you're going to mess things up, because if you're saying that Yah is wrong about how the earth was created and you're going to try and teach people this, then you're going to say Yah's wrong about everything. But we don't say much about that, do we? It doesn't fit the narrative. Right? It doesn't fit the narrative. But the reality is, like, this stuff is, in all honesty, real. And we keep listening to people. Oh yeah, well, they keep showing you pictures. NASA keeps telling you. NASA has told you over and over and over and over again. NASA keeps telling you, oh yeah, like everything that we show you, we have digitally altered. If everything NASA has shown you has been digitally altered, why do you think that the moon landing wasn't altered? If somebody says, "Oh, he's going to conspiracy theory now," no, I'm trying to tell you, like, external evidence is showing. Like, I pay attention to words because words mean what words mean. NASA is not going to do anything that's going to legally get them in trouble later on. If they're telling you a lie, they're going to keep telling you these lies, and if they get caught, they'll be able to say, "Oh no, we were telling you the whole time," right? Like, that's how these lies work. If they've told you that every picture you've ever seen about space, now I know you got a telescope and you can do this and whatever, right? I'm just saying, as far as every picture they've shown you, they tell you that every picture they show you, they have altered. Then why in the world do you think anything you've ever seen about space has not been altered? May I ask a question? NASA, like, look at this. I want you to see just the sense of this. and this is going to be, I know there's going to be conspiracy theory for many, right? So some people might check out. How you doing, TJ? All right. So I just want you to look at this. I just want you to look at this, right? Like they're telling you that they're telling you, but we won't believe them, right? Because we don't believe in law and etymology and actually believing what people say. We have to have this weird faith where we want somebody to tell us something and we're going to make it whatever we want rather than actually interpret what they're telling you, right? Okay. They told us that there was no way we could go anywhere. All of a sudden, we could shoot rockets up and we could have them land somewhere else, nuclear weapons, things like that. Okay. So, in that nuclear race during the Cold War, you have Russia and America going against each other. All right. You have Russia and America going against each other, correct? Are you with? Correct so far, right? Some of us even on here, you grew up in it. I didn't grow up in. Oh, I grew up at the end of it, but I didn't grow up, during the whole thing. Some of y'all, if y'all were around the really the 40s, the 30s, kind of sort of. But if you're around, definitely in the 50s, this was an everyday experience for you. It was Russia, America. Everybody was aligning themselves with those two, right? Yeah, and my wife is correct. Like in Hebrew, when you look at the word NASA, it actually nasa, it actually turns into the word deception, right? So they're even telling you, they're telling you the truth. But I'm sorry, not but. I'm sorry, babe. Right, be careful about my words. They're telling you the truth, NASA, right? So continuing that, you have Russia, you have America. All of a sudden, Russia starts saying that, hey, we can put something to orbit the Earth or do the same thing the sun does, which is what? Go around the Earth. The same thing they say the moon does, go around the Earth. The same thing that they sometimes even will say, it seems like, that there are asteroids that do, when you look up at Saturn and its rings and stuff, and they'll tell you that's not all moons and stuff. It's invisible rings, but you can also see, and also around your Uranus and other, you'll see what? Rocks and things that keep coming by and going around, rotating around, right? So anyway, they say, yeah, so we found a way to get this thing to orbit. Now, we're not 100% sure they did, though, but they were basically in this race. So they say, we can do something that orbits. So America's like, wow, we behind this and that or whatever. Now, remember, America up to that point, we want you got to look at the spirituality. America up to that point was saying that it was about, we need to be clean. We need to be at least look clean and moral. And it needs to be about the Most High and all these things that Marxism and all these different things are terrible, yada, 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 right? We need to stay away from a Marxist mindset. We need to stay away from a mindset that says that we give up moral values, right? We can't be about, even what's his name in the Buffalo, the dude who just shot everybody in Buffalo, even he talked about nihilism and all these things that say morality doesn't matter and this and that, and everybody can be what they want. America was like, we're going to have these humble values, blah, 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 blah. Remember, Stalin, though, is about beating the brakes off America by any means necessary. And he's teaching Marxism. He's teaching evolution. America wasn't teaching evolution. America was all about, it's about God. It's about God. God bless America. God this. The Bible says we're going to make sure, even though they weren't living it internally, externally, that's what they wanted to give out, right? So that's what they said. They said it was God that caused us to be able to go in and save the Jews and do all these things or whatever, right? It's God that told us that we had to make sure we fight against the evil communist regime. Like, that's what it was. If you didn't, and I didn't grow up in it, but I've studied and talked to people enough to where I understand, like, it was America was supposed to be God, and anybody who was anti-America is supposed to be against it, right? White man's burden, manifest destiny. That's what it was. That's why it's still to this day in a lot of these, even black churches, you will see an American flag, because it was, if you were with America's, you were supposed to be, with God, dag nabbit, right? It was about God. And if you were with America, everything had to be America because America represented God. That's what they taught. That was the Cold War, right? So Russia starts putting stuff in space, at least so they say. America at first is like, I think they lying, but maybe they are. Then Russia puts out, and they start putting stuff out in the news. And they start saying, okay, we're going to put this in space and that in space. America's trying, but they keep failing. Matter of fact, they try to put something up in space and it explodes, right? They try to put a person in space. Eventually, the person dies. Russia is killing the game. Apparently, they put a cosmonaut, not an astronaut, but a cosmonaut up there. You're having the back and forth. You're having the back and forth, right? But Americans who are up in high places, they keep trying to say, we don't really believe that's what's going on. But hey, man, they making it look like that's what's going on. We got to figure out a way to do something. Eventually, they come to a guy, and I can't remember the guy's name, but there's a movie. If you look up, they hired a guy. This is real. Like, this is something that NASA, the United States of America, everybody will admit to you, the United States corporations, etc., will admit to you wholeheartedly, right? That they hired a dude. He made a famous movie. I don't remember the name of the movie, but basically it looked like there was like this thing that like glowed, or like was like a some kind of orb. It had an orb eye and a light would go around or something like that. And the guy who played the character had a very monotonous voice, and it was like a horror type film. I don't know if it was all the way horror, but it was basically supposed to be, make you afraid. And the ship had consciousness. That's basically where they got the concept. If you've seen the movie Wall-E, which is a great movie, by the way, I really like that movie. But if you ever seen the movie Wall-E, it's the same. It's the same kind of thing. When that thing that takes over, that's got like the circle that looks like this right here. I don't know if it was lit up in Wall-E or not, but that basically just looks like this, right? And is talking to the dude the whole time. That's basically what they got. They basically got that character. It was like a homage or a shout out to the ancient, or not ancient, but to that old movie. The guy who made that movie was the same guy that they hired to be over the moon landing. Now, some people say, "Oh, he wasn't over this and that." Well, he was supposed to film everything. He was supposed to record everything, and he was supposed to make sure everything was all right. Right. So without us, because we don't have that much time left before we got to make sure we're out the way, so that you know the Honorable Maya and Sister Ro can come on and be ready for Shabbat Shalom service today. However, like, these are the things. Event Horizon. Okay, thank you. Right. But is that so? So he gets hired because they were like, it look so real. And still today, to this day, a lot of stuff like holds up. Like, it was very, very well done, to where you could not really tell, especially because they don't use as much stuff. Not Walt Disney, even though Walt Disney helped with stuff with America all the time, American rhetoric. But yeah, but this guy makes a movie, and they hire him to help out with the moon landing. Now, here's the deal. Hey, man, okay. Like I said, if you just put this to the side, you put this to the side. Here's the deal. We know for a fact that the flag waves, right? Now, how does a flag wave in the vacuum of space? Okay. We know for a fact that when they land on the moon landing, we know for a fact that they're obviously burned out. Or if you're going to land, and you got to put pressure in the ground to make sure that you don't hit too hard, and at the same time pressure in the ground to make sure that you're there, then obviously there's got to be some kind of rocks that move or something, but underneath there's nothing that's moved. We know for a fact that they're out in space, and for some reason we don't see any stars. Okay, I'm just like, we know for a fact there's certain things that we just look at and we go, okay. I'm not saying, so maybe the Earth is round, even if we want to go there. But I'm saying, I don't believe you've ever seen, because they told you, NASA told you, you've never seen a picture of anything from space or in space. You've never seen any picture without it being altered. Even if you believe it to be round, I don't think you've ever seen an Earth that's round. Right. Matter of fact, if I can be honest with you, the vacuum of space thing might be nonsense, anyways. Because in real talk, like, I know people want us to believe the vacuum, and I'm not saying that there's no validity to something like there. Air probably can be gone and this and that. But if it's a true vacuum, like, you can't have fire. You can't have fireballs called stars. It doesn't make sense. Right. But then again, people will say, oh, well, it's the heavenlies, and even if Elohim created, okay, all right. I'm not huge scientist. I don't comprehend, how something combusts on a level to where there's absolutely no energy or no air or no anything, but it just still makes its own. But hey, maybe it does, because hey, we're created, we make our own, but I still have to breathe in air. I still gotta, eat something. I still have to make sure that I replenish whatever's lost. And they keep telling us that energy can't come from nowhere, yet it keeps coming from nowhere, but it is what it is. That part I might be off on. But I say all that to say this: like, you see that, and they said they went to the moon. All right, hear what I'm saying. because I got to get ready to wrap it. And I know there's a lot of comments. Thanks for the love and everything. I might be able to get some of them, but I got to make sure we're out the way soon. And so we take our leave soon, so that the Honorable Maya and Sister Ro can be ready to go. Um, let me just put this on there. We went to the moon, right? That's what let's just say we went to the moon. That's what we were told. That we're going to go with it. We're going to be good Americans here. We went to the moon. All right. And then we went to the moon again. Okay. And then we try to go to the moon, but Apollo 13 happens. But hey, at least they got back safe. They saw the moon, they circled around the moon, but they didn't get to go. But hey, we still had the technology to get there. My question now is, why have you never been back to the moon? Just question. I think they might have made one more trip after that. I'm not sure. But why is it that it's been decades and you've never been back to the moon? And here's the deal, because one time, I don't know if this is, I think it might have been, well, I don't know. I don't know if I found this out when Maya and I were married, and now she can correct me. I'm not sure when I found this out. It would have been at the beginning when we were still in our first place we lived together. If I did when I, if I did find this out when we were together, I can't remember the exact year I found this out. But I found out that one of the reasons, supposedly the reason we never went back to the moon, even though they have space shuttles now, right? Which should be better as far as doing this stuff. But I guess space shuttles, they'll say, are for something else, more for orbit stuff than anything else. But they say the reason we haven't gone back to the moon, even though they say you go to space stations that are like Deep Space Nine and just be circling around up in space, if they can make Deep Space Nine look real, I don't know why you don't think they can make an orbit look real, but nonetheless, or something orbiting around look real. But they say the reason we never went back to the moon is because we lost the technology. It's just lost. It's gone. Nobody can remember how this happened. Nobody knows if it was an accident, if it burned in the fire, if something got lost, but we just can't find the technology. Right? How do you lose something that's on a computer? That's a great question. Also, too, speaking of computers, have you ever thought about this? They tell us that, like, watch this. Right in my hand is a cell phone, right? In the cell phone it's a computer now, right? When we carry around, like, your cell phone does things that your Macs, your MacBooks, your computers, your laptops, whatever you want to call them, they do things. Your phone does things that they cannot do, and you carry it in your hand. Do you know that they tell you guys remember the TI-82 calculator anybody had to use? They probably still have to use versions of the TI-85, TI-90 something, stuff like that. Anybody had to use a TI-82 calculator when you were in school? Okay. Anybody ever had to use a TI-82? Y'all remember the TI-82? Those of you who had to use it. The TI, they say that what got them to the moon, right? When you go, and I've seen these things in person that they were in. I've walked in them, right? They say that there was more technology in the TI-82 calculator than was in the technology that got them to the moon. Yo, you said TI-89. I don't remember the TI-89. I remember TI-83, TI-85, TI-82, and I couldn't even afford one. I think I got like one that somebody just like threw away or something, and I was able to get it to work again or something like that. Like, I couldn't afford the TI-82. Them things were expensive back in the day. But they say that they had more technology in a TI-82 calculator than what got you up to the moon. So, question: even if you forgot how to get there, if it took less technology than what was in your TI-82 calculator, how in the world can you not get back there? I just, like, I'm not saying that I'm 100% right. I could be wrong. I'm saying these are just questions that somebody's gonna have to make sense for me, because either they're lying to us outright, like they've been to the moon, but they just don't want to go back for some reason, or they doing something out there, or whatever, who knows, or they just never been. But something doesn't make sense. You know what I'm saying? You're telling me, I remember the games. You know, remember like the games like Frogger and stuff. Like, and you could play it on your TI-82 calculator, and that thing looked so basic, right? But it was so much fun and everything. I get it, right? But it's like it captured your imagination. And it seems like with this thing going to the moon, they just captured your imagination. They wanted to beat the Russians. The Russians kept saying stuff. And and they said, we're going to go ahead and get there. And one of the things that happened as we get ready to take our leave, but the reason why I'm talking about the spiritual aspect of this, if you didn't catch it yet, remember I said the Russians were all about evolution. Nobody really matters. Stalin is the end all be all of everything. He is their God. America saying that God is everything, right? And that the biblical God, at least what they call God, is everything. And that's who you're going against. And that's why Stalin is this figure that's supposed to be so crazy. We look at Stalin and all the people he killed, and we never look at all the people America kills, right? Because God bless America and God hates Stalin. That was what the Cold War was about. However, as soon as Stalin and them supposedly were sending cosmonauts to space, that was when America stopped saying God first and everything. And that's when America started saying maybe there's something to this evolution thing. That was the moment, right? Darwinism was not big. It was not accepted. It was a European principle, and Americans, they separated themselves from their European brethren on that. They said, hey, we not feeling that. Nope, God first, God this, blah, blah. Even if they weren't living by it, they were living by God says this, God says this, God says this, God says this. Right? That's even if they even if they're not going to live by it. God, 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 God. That's what it was about, right? All of a sudden, Russia gets to space, so to speak, and then they said, "Hey, you know what? We got to have better technology." And really, it never was about the space race. If you really pay attention to what it is, what are we still dealing with today that came out of the Cold War? Can anybody help me? What are we still dealing with today that came out of the Cold War? It was never about space. That's what they got you to focus on. What are we still dealing with? Supposedly you won against Russia, even though Russia is still gobbling up countries and still using denazification as a reason to be able to beat the brakes off of former Nazis, even though they themselves have people that did things worse than Nazis. Exactly. Thanks, babe, and thank everybody else who said something. It's about nuclear weapons. They took Nazis. Some of them went to Russia. Some of them went to America, and they paid them. And the space race, you thought it was about space, but it was about seeing who could make sure that they could bomb each other first. That's what the whole Cuban Missile Crisis was about, right? A lot of people don't know how that went down. I got to be really quick on this because we're coming up on 9:40, and we don't want to leave too much time before, we got to make sure everybody can transition over to the Shabbat Shalom service on the podcast. If you don't have the podcast, you can just look in our bio if you're on TikTok, or you can look in the or look on where it says website, click on the link tree and be able to find it. Okay. But here's the deal. Here's the deal, right? You ready? It was about, so basically JFK and them or whatever, America's beefing with Russia, same old, same old. I can't remember the name of the guy, not Christoph. Is it? I can't remember the name of the guy at the time, the Russian prime minister, whatever his name or position title would have been. Cuba has come to America. Remember, Cuba, the same Cuba that would fight for many African nations and to spill Cuban blood for us, right? As much as they want us to hate Castro, Cuba had just finished getting victory, right? Guevara and others had just finished getting victory, and they won. They're having an issue though with being able to take care of themselves and feed each other after all these years of war and stuff. They need help, and so they ask America first, right? And Castro eventually takes over, right? They ask America first, will you help us? America says, we wanted your enemy to win. Khrushchev, thank you. They say, America says, we want your enemy to win. Since your enemy didn't win, we got beef with you because your enemy was our friend. So we're not really going to help you. Cuba says, I mean, if y'all going to let us die off or whatever, bump y'all. And they go to Russia. That's how Cuba gets into the communist thing. And they say, hey, can you help us out? Russia says, we'll help you out, but, you owe us. And then Russia eventually brings over some things that they're going to use to put together because Russia's technology, they're losing the battle, right? a little bit as far as the war of the being able to have the rocket technology, and America's actually a little better at this time. So, Russia always used to say, yeah, we can send rockets anywhere. We'll kill anybody. But it was kind of like what the North Koreans are doing. They would do these tests and stuff. And yeah, they couldn't really do much like what they said. They just so happened to have the technology, but they really didn't have actually like to the level that they said. So then Russia sneaks in, right? America doesn't have the embargo and everything on Cuba at the time. Russia sneaks in basically nuclear weapons, nuclear warheads, and they start putting them together on the island. America, who has planes that fly over Cuba all the time and takes pictures, flies over and they look at these pictures in DC, and they go, wait a minute, are they putting together weapons? And if they're putting together weapons, there's a possibility these are nuclear weapons. Castro has already said, hey, come on over and do this, help us out. If we in this communism thing, hey, so be it. And if we end up dying out here as a martyr, as Cubans, hey, we believe that America's evil if they were going to let us die anyways. So Cuba's all in. Russia says they're all in and sends the stuff over there. America finds out about it. They put an embargo there, and they put some ships out there as Russia's bringing ships over. So now you got ships that are there, Russian ships that are there. You also got Russian subs that are there. You also got American subs that are there. Everything jumps off real fast. This is in the midst of, we're going to send somebody to the moon, right? It's in the midst of, eventually Kennedy's going to say, we're sending it to the moon. That's going to be his, hey, we're going to keep building stuff, right? He even tells you at that time, he said, if Russia or anybody ever messes with America, he said, we got something for him. He said, look up Montana, which still exists today, obviously, right? But why don't a lot of people live in certain places in Montana? Because Montana is nuclear weapon capital of the world, right? And if anything ever jumped off, all the nukes coming out of Montana. Not all of them, obviously, but you know what I'm saying? Like a whole bunch of them. So he had already said, oh, like, yeah, we gonna send people to space, but in his mind, hey, we need to build up these places that we got, right? With all these nukes and nuclear technology and stuff. So then basically America set the embargo. They stop him from coming. Russia chickens out. Castro's like, yo, I thought everything was on. If it's World War III, it's World War III. Let's get it on and popping. They left him alone. Now, Cuba's by itself. America keeps an embargo. America says, we don't trust you, da-da-da-da. Cuba's like, well, we don't like y'all. We don't trust y'all, but we still communists, even though Russia's messed up. But then they said, well, maybe we're not communists all the way since communism let us down. But then they started helping out other countries, hoping that these countries would go against them. So like when you look at what happened in the Republic of Congo left, was able to get out from the power of Leopold. I've been there before. Belgium was able to get out from underneath Belgium. And so, and Belgium tried to still keep doing wild stuff to them or whatever. But guess what? Castro sent cats to help us over there. Castro sent people to fight in South Africa. Castro sent people to fight, for independence in Ghana and Nigeria. So that's why a lot of African people that's why even though some people don't even like Nelson Mandela because they believe he was whitewashing about white agenda, even Nelson Mandela was like, yo, you try to tell me to go against Castro, I can't go against Castro because when we needed help and we asked y'all were busy saying apartheid was all right. Right, all that to come back to say that basically the whole thing of evolution versus God doesn't matter, whatever. America didn't care about evolution or at all. They didn't care for it at all. They didn't teach it at all. It was only when the Russians were doing this and that or whatever they used evolution, right, which has very Eurocentric, racist, Darwinism, right? Read his book, right? The Struggle of Survival for Favored Races, right? That's in the title. He used it to be able to say, all right, America's used it to say, we're going to start teaching evolution. We're going to keep doing this thing. And we're going to do it to say, we got to protect America. Just like they did with September 11th. They was killing you on September 10th. Go look up some news articles. They was killing you on September 10th, 2001. But September 11th, 2001 came on. All of a sudden, it was F everybody. We love God. We love America. Same thing. Right? External evidence for the same thing that keeps on going. Anyways, I've gone well beyond now. Thank you so much. We hope that you guys join us on the podcast. We will have the podcast from 10 to 11. We will have our weekly meeting back today where we're just going to kind of have some fun for a little bit. So if you want to join us for that, that'll be at 11 o'clock. And to just kind of say hello to everybody. It's been a minute, so not going to come with a whole bunch of stuff, announcements and all that. We told you all the stuff. Those who are going to be beating us, 27th, 28th will be in Chicago. 29th, 30th will be in 27th, 20th will be in Chicago. 29th, 30th will be in Detroit. And we look forward to talking to you guys very soon. Please check out, once again, my wife on TikTok, YouTube, her website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish, not A-N-D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. She's a healer, herbalist, chemist, biologist by degree, as well as a teacher at SOC University. And she's doing an excellent job. Just started her, for the second semester, she just started teaching on introduction to herbalism. So we're excited and thankful for her. And her mother will be on the Shabbat Shalom service at 10 a.m. Eastern New York time in a little over 10 minutes to be able to continue the series that they've been doing for this month. And so we thank you. We appreciate you. We honor you. We appreciate the King, Queen, and each and every one of you. Study this word, meditate on it to make sure that what I said is something that's correct and you can use it. And if you can use it, hey, make sure you're not just a hearer of it, but be a doer of it as well. We honor the King, Queen, each and every one of you. And thank you so much. As always, it's been Pastor Kofi, Pastor Servant of Christ, where we are always changing lives one mind at a time by being a voice of the voiceless and speaking the unspoken until I have the great privilege, opportunity, and responsibility of being in front of you all again. Please remember, as always, Yashdel, that you are loved, you are necessary, you are majestic, you're fearfully and wonderfully made, and you, which is all of us working together, will be the reason why people who are in this system no longer have to be of it. If for some reason you want to help us with your time, your talent, your effort, your energy, prayers, gifts, finances, even whatever. Some of you give offerings, some of you give gifts, some of you give donations, some of you give tithes. Bless you. And thank you for helping us with stuff. If you want to help out with Yah's Land Project 83 and us developing land, some of you are telling us that we can start growing stuff on your land so that we can start feeding the community, feeding you first, of course, and then feeding the community. We're so grateful and thankful to each and every one of you. But just check us out. If you're on the podcast, if you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, just simply look at the video or the episode and look at the description. You'll be able to find ways to get in touch with us. If you're on TikTok, once again, go to our main TikTok page, look at our bio for a little bit of information, for a lot of bit of information. Click on where it says website, that's our link tree, and you'll be able to find everything from classes to anything else that you're interested in. Thank you so much. Shabbat Shalom to everybody. We'll see you guys in a few minutes over in the podcast, and have an extraordinary day. And I hope to see some of you guys at 11 for the weekly meeting. Shalom. Peace.